choya sampo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngoda pelge drolora zampe tepareche palden lame shabla solvade Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Sane Karm Utta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Sane Karm Utta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasa Utta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Karm Utta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Kar Utta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Kar Utta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Kar Utta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Kar Utta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Siksu So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Oyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Tsechi Ningne Solwa Debe Tse Dejen Korlo Visu Lekshune Yila Sambe Dudun Malupa Gemel Hungi Drupra Chingi Lo Tsoni Sodan Diktun Shakpe Tse Dungi Namke Yinsu Lekshune Lapchen Tsoni Yonsu Tsopat Cherani Dun Chamra Chingi Lo Chanchu Pargi Ninsen Tukun Tu Niu Peme Siudru Lekshune Chanchu Drube Gegen Kunshishi Tungen Dela Drupra Chingi Loba Dagi Lona Chola Chokpa Da Chomin Samchor Ngemba Shiwa Chodan Tumbe Dudu Malupa Beme Lungi Drupra Chingi Lo Dorna Tingne Tseraba Tamche Dan Techi Pardu Nekawa Tam Rese Kyamne Lama Kele Me Tukche Chingi Dala Siksu Sol Gongyab Drewe Nyamda Dachala Chetsun Lame Tuje Rab Gongne Kudan Sunge Nawa Drame Tu Nyamsunyongwe Kesan Topresho Kewa Kuntu Yanda Lama Dan Rame Cheki Pela Longchechi Sadan Lamge Yunde Rabzone Dorje Change Kopa Nyurtobesho Pakyuke Kudandagi Loya Pakyuke Sundandaki Pakyuke Tudan chedan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi chushe gibe sonam ki drola pinchre sange drupar shu sange chedan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchre sange drupar shu sange chedan tsogi chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchre sange
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Buongiorno.
Good morning. I wanted to begin today with a short story, anecdote. When I heard it for the first time, it really touched me. It showed me, it opened up it opened up to a new perspective for me. And it's the story of when Alexander the Great arrived to the north of India, the very beginning of the Indus River that gives the name India to India. And he got there, and there was a big rock, and on this rock a man was seated. He was naked. He had long hair, kind of dreadlocks. Today we would call him a sadhu. And there are in India, you see these men who have ash on their body. They go around half naked, and this man was there seated. He was meditating. He was a meditator. And when Alexander the Great came close to him, saw him, this man who was so different from other men he had seen, I imagine he found in him something different in him, a certain charisma, a certain stability. And he came to him and it asked him, "But what are you doing? What is it that you do?" And he saw him there sitting quietly for hours. He said, "What are you doing?" And this man answered, "Oh, in my life, I contemplate nothingness." And Alexander the Great started laughing. And he said, "What a useless activity, spending one's life contemplating nothingness." And then he joked a little bit. And apparently, Alexander the Great called him the gymnosoft, the wise naked man. And then this man, the meditator, asked him, "Well, what do you do in your life?" And very proudly, Alexander the Great answered, "I'm conquering the world." And at this point, the gymnosoft, he started laughing. And he said, what a useless activity. And actually, when I think about trying to conquer the world, it's just a tremendous amount of problems. I mean, try to imagine being the owner of the world, an emperor. Anyway, beyond that, this story brings us takes us to two different paradigms. And in our reality, we have both of them. One paradigm is the one that Alexander the Great had, this paradigm of a linear reality, where life is lived but once. You need to do your best to realize something, to be great. In life is a line. There's point A, which is birth, and then there's death at some point, which is point B. And then there could be a point C, heaven or hell, but it's very linear. And so we live life only once. This day that we're living today will never repeat itself. And in this linear view, what's important more than anything else is what we do. This gymnosoft meditator came from a different reality where the paradigm was not a linear reality, but a circular one. There is point A, which is birth. There is a point B, which is death, but they actually point A and point B meet in these lines bend and they meet, and then the death brings back to another life. And so birth and death are nothing other than two sides of the same point. So if we take a circle and we put a line through it, and we see a half circle, half of the circle we call birth, half of the other circle we call death. And the main difference is that when one lives one's reality in a circular way and not linear, it's not what you do is not very important. It's not as important as what you become, what you are, because that same thing you're going to do again and again and again. The point isn't about what you do. The point is about how you transform yourself as you live. There's also a story in the ancient Indian mythology. The actual names I'm a little bit missing. But I think it has to do with Ganesh, where he wanted to conquer the highest mountain, Mount Meru, the equivalent Mount Kailash. And when he got to the top, to the summit, and he wanted to plant the flag to say, "Here I am," he looked around and saw thousands and thousands of other flags that had already been planted. And at that point, he understood it wasn't getting somewhere to say, "I've arrived," but the point is getting there and seeing how one has transformed himself. It makes me think about, our fascination with being the first to get to the moon. Who cares? What's important is how that experience transforms us. So, who am I once that has been achieved after that achievement? And if we observe well in our life, we live a circular reality, whether we're aware of it or not. Our reality is cyclical. Just look at nature. Every day, it's a cycle, the earth that turns around itself. We have inner cycles within our body. We have the cycles of 1 year, of one month. We have natural cycles that interact also with our own life experiences. And I don't know how or why, but we have this very strange idea that somehow we can exist and be independent from the world that surrounds us. And we have our life like a straight line. We set our life like a straight line. And we don't realize, we're not aware that actually that it's not a straight line, but it's like a spiral. And then life is made up of many, many cycles. And so, like a spiral that goes round and round, and it goes around to that same point. It feels like it's the same point. If you look up or down, but if you look to the side, you can see that that there's transformation. And so we live in a cyclic reality. And I don't know exactly why. As I said before, the how, the why, the when, we've lost this connection. Just look in this moment. Here it's Easter time. What is Easter? Easter arrives. Today we celebrate it within a Christian context. But it actually represents passage, renovation, regeneration. And even the name Pascua comes from Pesa, which is Hebrew. So before the Christian Easter, there was the Jewish Passover, Pesa, this passage when where it's celebrated the Jewish people who were able to leave the desert, and so this was celebrated in Mesopotamia, in Greece, where they were celebrating spring, the fact that winter is over, and now it's the moment to open ourselves up for this new period, this new season. And we all are strongly influenced by the natural cycles. Just look in the springtime. The liver, does it react in the same way as it does in the wintertime? No. We know the importance. When the spring comes, we need to, what should we do to our liver? We should purify our liver. There is a connection, and this brings us to another question. It can be complicated, but actually quite easy too. The question is, we need to point our finger. Where is our mind? Our tendency to say our mind is here in our head. But we know very well, scientifically speaking, from the neuroscience, that our mind is connected, is throughout the entire body. Our emotions, for example, have a strong connection to chemical states that are connected to our liver, to our kidneys, and the rest of our body. So springtime comes. If we don't purify well, if we're not careful about how we eat, which is it should be different from what we eat during the winter time, because our body is interacting with our surroundings. And if we don't do it well, it shows that we're not in harmony with nature, with our surrounding nature, which can create problems, emotional problems and behavioral problems beyond physical problems. So in reality, having a moment where we say to everyone, okay, wake up, spring is here. Do we want to change our behavior? We understand that we need to see things differently, prepare ourselves for this new year that's coming. A little bit like, it's a little bit like when we have New Year's, and if we see, the 21st of December is the shortest day of the year. The 24th of December is the first day where to align to the eyes, we can actually see the that the days are starting to get longer, where we can actually say, okay, winter has now passed, we're going towards longer days. And this is just another way that shows us that we live in a cyclic reality. So for millennia, we as human beings, we've seen and lived and known the importance of recognizing these important natural cycles and being in harmony with these cycles. We can talk to any doctor. I can't say to any medical system, but what I see that many traditions, even traditional or modern, do they say that you should eat in the same way all year long, or depending on the season, one should eat in a certain way? Theoretically, we should eat differently. So eating a banana in the wintertime in Italy, this is a really, I mean, I like bananas and I eat it too in the wintertime, but it's really a sign of great ignorance. It shows that it's, or even worse, if you're eating a mango. I mean, these are extremely cold-natured fruits that grow in hot areas. So growing in a hot area, it compensates for that heat by bringing its cold nature. So one should eat it when one is in a hot place. If I'm in a cold place where the foods that grow there, they actually compensate that with bringing heat to that cold area. Instead, if I eat food that grows on the other side of the planet, and who knows how it's kept and how it got here, it has a different function. What I'm going to do is I'm reinforcing or creating unbalance in my body. So the way we live to be well, because that, at the end of the day, that's what we all want. It's necessary to create as much as we can to create harmony and balance. This harmony comes through our feelings, through our thoughts, our inner way of interacting with the world. But we have another important component, which is our physical way of interacting with the world, our way of eating, etc. I don't know, there are certain types of behavior that really bring consequences. For example, in Tibetan medicine that I studied very little, but in the little that I saw, when someone comes with some kind of unbalance, a Tibetan doctor should try to treat that problem on 3 different levels. The first one is on a behavioral level, looking at the lifestyle of that person that brings to this unbalance, and try to bring that person to rebalance. Then we have that, and when that's not enough, then the doctor can give a diet, and when the diet is not enough, you can also give the mineral herbs, medicine to take. And then when that's not enough, then we do also therapies, moxa, massages, or acupuncture. These are the different passages. So, for example, if you go to high altitudes, like in Tibet, I remember that this was also said by Lama Ganchen. He said, don't take a shower every day, especially in the winter time. And instead, if you come from a culture like Brazil, for example, where taking a shower twice a day is normal, but if you do that in the winter time at 4,000 meters, after a few days, the skin starts to dry out as if it were actually cracking. Taking a shower every day at that high altitude actually increases the wind humor, and one starts to feel great anxiety and inner agitation. So in this case, one should put fat on one's skin, like an oil. In Tibet, they use butter to diminish this state of anxiety. So what happens? Maybe one doesn't know how to be in harmony with his surroundings. Maybe he takes a shower every day, eats the wrong kind of foods, and that increases this imbalance. It actually takes one to a state of more anxiety, more tension. One could then end up fighting. Could end up fighting and not sleeping well, and then being tired. One is more tense and is more prone to fighting. I didn't mean to talk about this, but just to conclude this subject, once we were in Milan many years ago with Lama Lawan. Many of you must remember Lama Lawan. He was a Lama he was a Tibetan doctor, lived in Milan for many, many years. One of the nicest people I've ever met, had such a kind heart. Anyway, one day I was there with Lama Lawan, and there was a girl who came to interview him for like Donna Moderna, some kind of magazine. And so she was asking she wanted to know about the Tibetan medicine, etc. So she asked Lama Lawan, here in the West, what are the greatest imbalances in the West? What are the most common problems that you see in Westerners? And he said that the greatest problem I see is a wind imbalance that brings anxiety and insomnia, nervousness, sadness, depression. It's all result of this wind humor that comes from too many thoughts. And she asked, why? What creates that? And he said the main reason. He said there's too much salad for dinner. In the evening, one needs to eat something of warm nature. These light foods that are cold natures increase all of these characteristics, and they create also this vicious cycle. And he said the best thing, he was very, very Tibetan. He said the best thing in the evening is to have a soup made with with cow cow tail bone. She said there's a butcher right around the corner that he sells it. And she said, well, what about the cholesterol? I said, what cholesterol? This is what you need at night. So what I want to say with all this is that often we make choices. We have a lifestyle as if our being existed completely disconnected from everything else. So I'm on my way as if where I am and the people around me, those I interact with, my surroundings, as if all of that had no effect on me. So we need to be in harmony with the world. It's not, we shouldn't expect nature to bend to our needs. If we want to be in harmony, our choices, our way of behaving should be in harmony with nature. Is that clear? Like, it's not normal, for example, that outside is minus 10 degrees and inside is 25. Obviously, if one keeps going inside, outside, it will get sick. Like, it's also not normal for it to be 40 degrees outside and inside to be to be 18. When I say it's not normal, it's not healthy. Anyway, as I said before, this was not what I wanted to talk about. The subject is that we live in a cyclical reality, and it's very important for us to understand the cycles that we're living. There's the cycle of day and night. Every time the sun comes up, there's a new cycle that starts. There are cycles of the moon. It's a complete cycle of the moon that's divided into 4 parts, which actually is the division of a week. That starts from there. So there's the cycle of the moon. So the moon is, we call it a planet, but it's a body, a celestial body that influences us tremendously. Look at the influence that the moon has on the tide, on the plants, on us. There are many studies that show they've taken the lunar phases and they looked at the crimes committed, and they saw that on the days of full moon there's a considerable increase in crimes of passion. And we say in Tibetan tradition, the Buddhist tradition, that on a full moon emotions are stronger, the good ones and bad ones. One is more susceptible to his emotions. It's said that on a full moon, one needs to meditate more, practice more, pray more, be more careful, mostly because if on those days one is not careful, one can be taken by those negative emotions. One needs to be more careful. If you need to cut a certain plant, there's a difference if it's a waxing moon or if a waning moon. So there is a difference in our reality, and that's why we have these cycles within the month, to help us understand that there's a cycle of the moon and to be in harmony, in symphony with this. So, and instead today, the calendar, what does it become? How do we live a calendar? In a linear way or a cyclical way? The calendar for most of us has become a place where we organize the things we need to do. Actually, a calendar is a representation of the cycles of nature. I saw this the first time when I started to calculate and learn about the Tibetan calendar, which was really beautiful. It was the first time I was able to understand a little bit better the relationship I had with a calendar, and I saw that a superficial relationship with a calendar is unhealthy. Even the first calendars, the first watches, these are representations of our solar system that we interact with. So why do we need a calendar? It helps us understand where we are and the cycles of nature around us. What's the main function? Why do we need to know? Why do we need to know what lunar phase we're in? Why do we need to know, what part of the season I'm in? What season I'm in? Because I'm susceptible. I'm influenced by all of that. So by knowing where I am, I can choose with more awareness how I want to act and be more careful about the influences that are present. The Tibetan calendar is one of the very few calendars that is actually lunar and solar in Tibet, for example. Up to very short time ago, one needed to work for 3 months to calculate the yearly annual calendar, because every day the positions of the planet were mapped out, and it's very particular. This way I studied it, and when you do the texts of astrology, actually it's astronomy. It's not there's it's about calculating the position of the planets, and these verses in Tibetan are all in verse, where the numbers you need to calculate. It's very complicated. You need to calculate and divide, and if the number is higher, you need to do this or that, and it's all in verse, where for the numbers, the actual names of numbers are not used. Instead of a number, a name is used. We say, like when we do spelling in Italian, for example, or in English, it would be A for apple or P for Paul, and instead, 2 they say eyes. 3 is fire because it makes a triangle. 4 is river because in India there are the 4 main rivers that come from the Himalayas. 6 would be tastes, because there are 6 different tastes. 7 mountains, there's 7 different mountains. 8, and we say Naga because there are 8 different types of Naga spirits. 9 is mother because of the 9 months of gestation. 10 is sky, and then there are the composed numbers, like 11 is wrathful. So when you need to describe the numbers, you also say it backwards. You start with the number on our right, and what happens is sometimes some texts were cited using this terminology, like, for example, a carriage. carriage can mean like a carriage can be translated wrongly to mean corpse, you know, and so they just made very wrong translations. So 06, or you know, the 60, because then it's backwards, instead is translated as like the corpse in the sky. Or for example, there's a text of the Kala Chakra written by the Panchen Lama. Even great wise men, they were translating, trying to give meaning to the word without understanding that those were actually references to numbers. But this allowed people to memorize the text, memorize the formulas much better. Because there wasn't paper, one needed to actually memorize everything. So they had all this system of calculation totally memorized. So not having paper and pen, how did they make calculations? They would take a kind of tray made of wood and put sand, very thin sand, and they would, and with like a stick, and they would write into the sand. And they did this up until very short time ago. Today, I mean, it was one of the jobs I did in Tibet was to convert this job into an Excel program. It took many, many months of work, but we were able in the end. Anyway, this allowed me to see, and the conclusion that I want to share with you is that when we have a calendar in front of us, actually it's a representation of nature's cycles. And it's an invitation, an opportunity for us to be in harmony with this calendar. The Tibetan calendar, for example, is something very useful, because if you take a day of the month in the Tibetan calendar, actually it represents the phases of the moon. Every day represents 12 degrees of the development of the moon along its cycle. So the 15th is always full moon, and the 30th, sorry, the 15th is always new moon, and the 30th is always full moon. Even the special days where we say this is the day to do the Tara Puja, which is the 8th day, or the 10th day is to do another practice. The 25th day is a Dakini day for other types of pujas. These represent the specific position of the moon that have a specific effect on us. They're days that are more favorable for certain types of practices. It said it's better to begin something new when we're in a waxing moon. This energy of growth. Anyway, my point is we have these tools, and it's important to use them. The cycles of the year, so we have Christmas, we have Easter. These are two moments where we stop, because the celebration, moments of celebration, it's important to stop and ask ourselves and reflect on the fact that a cycle is ending, a new cycle is beginning. What is it that I want to do? Because a fundamental point of cycles is understanding that we're going to repeat something that we have already done. And what's most important is not what we're going to do, but how we're going to live it. Because we've already lived many, many new springs. And we hope to have many to come. What's important is how we live it. Because if I live in an unbalanced way, at the end of the day, let's take the example, like I eat something that I shouldn't eat that time of the year. That affects my body. It affects my body in a certain way. In the springtime, I I do some kind of detox that affects the chemistry of my body, the hormones, etc., that affect my emotions, and our emotions affect our behavior. The more I act in a certain way, the more I transform myself in that direction, even on a more subtle way. And if we use more modern terms, we can talk about epigenetics. And in epigenetics, our DNA, that would be, according to modern science, would be one of the most subtle levels of our being. So our DNA transforms according to how we interact with our surroundings. And what I have understood from epigenetics, there are two different kinds of surroundings. There's external environment, and then there's an internal environment. The external environment surroundings are people, situations, everything that happens outside, everything that we interact with outside. This interaction transforms us on a subtle, very subtle level. But the inner environment, our emotions, and how we live, how how we see the outside world from inside, this has the greatest transformatory power. So according to how I live, according to my inner environment, I'm making a genetic transformation. Once that transformation comes about, it takes a tremendous amount of energy to go against that. I heard that when someone makes a change from inside out, makes a genetic change, that can go on for 3 generations, can influence 3 generations. If we talk about from a Buddhist point of view, what happens is every time we have an interaction, a behavior, according to the intensity of that and the type of interaction, we're creating transformation on different levels, on a gross level, a subtle level, and a very subtle level. Our real objective is to create positive changes that bring positive results to ourselves and to others on a very subtle level that goes beyond today, goes beyond the day of tomorrow, and goes beyond actual death, goes from life to life. We want to create changes on a very subtle level, on a this very subtle level is very similar to the DNA, because it's not a reality that is determining, but it's a reality that will give a probability. So a determining reality means if this, then that. Instead, if it's a probability, it says if this, then this is possible. I mean, if I put in a seed, it's not given that it will sprout. It depends on many factors, the soil, the water, the sun. But without that seed, you can put as much water as you want. There's no possibility for that sprout to come, for that seed to sprout. On a genetic point of view, it's explained that our DNA is a reality that is connected to probability. So we have certain dispositions, and according to the interaction, we can awaken one one aspect or another. There was one study that was really interesting, where one researcher looked at identical twins. He looked at identical twins who were raised in different families. They were separated at birth, and they grew up in totally different contexts. And he saw them at 40, 50 years old, and he looked at what aspects of their personality were same and which one were different. And he saw that sometimes they had extremely similar aspects and some that were extremely different. So they had similar seeds but different conditions. And in Tibetan Buddhism, we say that from one life to the next, we bring our very subtle mind. It's a state of our being that is non-conceptual. It's a state of the mind where there are no thoughts like this is this, that is that. There's no discernment, there's no projection. It's a non-emotional state. There's no attraction nor aversion. There's no pleasure nor pain. It's a state where there's only the imprints, the predispositions, called pakcha in Tibetan, which means imprints. These imprints, these predispositions that we create along our life, and they're like seeds that are planted in our mind stream, our mental continuum. And then at a certain point in our life, we can sprout one seed or another, but we can't sprout seeds that we don't have. And if there is a seed, and if there's the seed and a water, there will be a result. So when we think mid and long term, what's most important is transforming our being on a very subtle level. In other words, creating healthy predispositions, because the situations change. The more healthy seeds that we have, then the more chance we have to develop those healthy characteristics, and vice versa. In related to this life and the next. The good news is, in order to cultivate healthy predispositions, we need to live a healthy life. I mean, the opposite would be difficult, wouldn't it? For example, there's no concept of sacrifice. Sometimes I hear people say, "Oh, with all the problems I've had, if I don't get enlightenment, then I don't know who can." As if problems bring a greater spiritual growth. No. I mean, I can suffer a lot and react to that suffering with suffering and hate, and do nothing other than increase and reinforce that cycle of suffering. If I'm in a dark place, for example, I can complain a lot about the darkness, but it doesn't bring light. I need to concentrate instead on the light. Our spiritual path, understood as an inner path of development of our like aspects that bring peace. It is not about suffering or sacrificing. We can use this suffering as a moment of growth. This is possible, But it's not that suffering itself is a tool in and of itself. Is that difference clear? So to cultivate our healthy, virtuous aspects, we need to live a healthy and virtuous life. What happens is the following. To make a change on a very subtle level, and let's use a comparison with modern science that we understand well. If I want to make a change on a genetic level, what's the strongest tool that I have? Inner environment or my outer environment? No, it's an inner environment. And within this inner environment, it's not about my thoughts. It's about emotions. And in Tibetan Buddhism, it's said that the gross mind is has to do mostly with our conceptual level of existence, or emotions that are currently manifest. On a subtle level, it's mostly our emotions which are not currently manifested. So once I am if I'm angry, then that would be part of the gross mind. If the anger that I have is not actually out there, is not manifested, then would be our subtle mind. So in Tibetan, there is no word for emotion. And even within our own languages, emotion is a relatively new word, but it's a very powerful word. In this case, the word that would be used in Tibetan would be attraction, aversion, and neutrality. So where there's attraction, aversion, and indifference. And then with all the different manifestations of those three: anger, resentment, attachment, dissatisfaction, and many other inner states that today we call emotions. So what happens is our coarse mind, our gross mind, what is happening on a manifested level that influences what exists on a subtle level. What I see, what I hear, the situations that I interact with, everything that happens on a coarse level that's made up of the six senses. So we have the five senses plus the sense of the mind. Every interaction on a gross level influences and influences a more subtle transformation. The more I get angry, the more angry I will become and will get, because the more I familiarize myself with something, the easier it becomes. And what happens on a more subtle level is it's more and more determines what will come about on a very subtle level. So our coarse level interactions shape what will happen on a subtle level, which in turn will shape what will develop, what will happen on a very subtle level. And so one influences the other. And at the same time, it's not possible to show something on a very subtle level that doesn't exist on a subtle level, and it's impossible also to show something on a gross level that doesn't exist on a subtle level. Is that clear? So when we show a certain emotion, a certain attitude in reality, what happens? I interact with the world around me. I see something, I hear something, I come into contact with something, and what I interact with is as if it is sent a signal inside that wakes up something inside. I live that external reality through an inner reality. But what is on a subtle level doesn't exist independently from what is on a very subtle level. In other words, we can't have the sprout without the seed. And we can't have a plant with fruit without the sprout. But what happens is, according to the plants that we plant, the fruit grows, and the fruit drops and also leaves other seeds, which is a metaphor that works very well. So the seeds at certain point will meet conditions. The interactions are conditions that allows that seed to sprout, first on a very subtle level to a subtle level, and then at a subtle level that sprout turns into a plant. Could be the coarse level, the gross level, so creates fruit that then creates new seeds that can then again sprout, creating again a new cycle. We need to be careful about the type of seeds we plant. How can I plant seeds depending on the interactions that I have, that I create, and the key is that the plants that are already there are plants that are the fruit of previously planted seeds. If I want only sweet fruit, I don't want bitter fruit. But I find myself with many bitter fruit, plants that give bitter fruit. So I don't want those anymore. So I need to stop giving water to the plants that give bitter fruit, and I need to give water to plants that give sweet fruit. And so if I stop watering the fruit that gives bitter, the plants that give bitter fruit, they'll get weaker and weaker, and at a certain point they will die and they won't give any more fruit. So our deeper aspects, the more they are manifest, and the more we interact with this bitter fruit, the more seeds they will also leave. And instead, as I said before, one of the keys is to recognize what our predispositions are, the ones that we have nourished, the ones that are shown, that we don't want to carry with us, that we need instead to stop feeding, to stop watering, and especially stop picking that bitter fruit, and recognize other plants that we have and that we want to continue, that we want to grow stronger, and recognize what seeds we have that are hardly sprouts, but we want them to grow. We want to increase their strength. And every springtime, every new spring that comes, our question is, in this spring, what plants do I want to grow, because the spring comes and then it will pass, and then I will find ourselves with another springtime. Here we are again and again. We have this opportunity now to choose the seeds that we want to plant. So this moment comes and it goes, and as it's manifesting, it's almost gone, but it leaves an imprint. This moment, it's using another kind of terminology. This action, this interaction, ends almost at the same moment that it's born, but it leaves an inertia, a kind of karmic force. And when it comes into contact with a condition, it will give its fruit. If we take this and we see like the definition of samsara, for example, it's explained through the 12 links of interdependence, which we've already seen here. The 12 links of interdependence, they explain how our reality works, this cycle of suffering, where at the beginning we have ignorance, then we have the part that would be consciousness. So together with ignorance, we interact, and from that interaction, we plant a seed in our mind stream. And in that mind stream, there's the moment where we plant, and then there's the moment we actually gather the fruit. When you get the fruit from our consciousness, we pick a psychophysical reality. So when we have this, when this seed is nourished or manifests on a gross level, a coarse level, it's a psychophysical reality. So it's this interaction of body and mind, and then interacts with all of our senses, our 5 sense powers, and every time there's this contact with any of the objects of our senses, then comes aversion to suffering and attraction to happiness, and we see how we react to that, which plants a new seed. And basically, at that point, it's watering a new seed. And when we interact, our interaction, we're doing 2 things at the same time. We're planting new seeds or watering existing seeds. So planting new seeds or reinforcing old seeds, we're creating predispositions, and at the same time, we're allowing an existing seed to sprout. And we live in this cycle. I said it very superficially because I don't want to get into the details of the 12 links of interdependence. That would take 3 days to explain. But my point is, what happens on the surface is extremely important, but it's not the objective. What happens on the surface has 2 levels, actually, an external level and also an inner level. Using more modern terminology, and actually exists in Buddhism too, we have an external environment and an internal environment. But so the outside affects the inner environment, but the inner environment has a greater power of transformation, how I live something. And we have the ability to choose how we want, we have the ability to choose what we want to nourish. It's as if every person were a garden where many different seeds have been planted. There's strawberries and apples and chili peppers. And the fact that I put many strawberries, and then in the middle of my strawberries, if I plant many strawberries, and then in the middle I put a chili pepper, is that going to make the chili pepper sweet? No. So what happens if a chili pepper, what if there's a chili pepper planted in the middle of a strawberry field? and I give importance only to the chili pepper. I only water that chili pepper. Then after a while, we'll have more chili peppers than strawberries. So what happens is we have different predispositions that are present currently. And it's really beautiful to look at ourselves and say, I'm not an orange or a strawberry or a chili pepper, and I'm a mixture of it all, and I'm not only what has sprouted, I'm also the seed underground. I'm the union of all of this. Are we able to understand this? And a fundamental point of Buddhism, and we'll see this when we look at self-healing, is that the seeds, the necessary seeds to have a perfectly harmonious garden, to be in harmony with ourselves and the world in which the world surrounding us, these necessary seeds, we have them already. I don't know if you've heard the expression, you know, we all have the Buddha nature or pure nature, or even some people even say we're Buddhas but we're already Buddhas, but we don't know it. And I would add that if we're Buddhas and we don't even know it, then we'd be pretty ignorant Buddhas. That seems a little extreme. But we have the potential, understood as the seeds. The seeds are there. Some seeds are really hidden and weak, but they're there. And it's a question about which one we want to nourish and which ones we want to stop watering. I don't understand anything about gardening, but I'm really the last person to be talking about this. But what happens is, in our reality, there's certain plants that when they sprout, they impede others from growing. In the same way, on a gross level, when one on a subtle level, yes, but on a gross level, when we have one emotion, that emotion keeps another one from manifesting. For example, it's impossible to feel hate and love for the same object at the same time. I can feel hate for one thing and love for another thing, but two thoughts, two feelings that are directly opposite in relation to the same object are impossible to coexist simultaneously. The example we've given many times, try to think to generate the feeling of attraction for water. I like water. I want water. Are you able to have this thought? It's something we've all experienced. And now try to think, I don't want water, and then generate aversion towards water. Try to have these two thoughts at the exact same time. I want water, I don't want water. Are you able? No. One right after the other. You can do like a ping pong of your thoughts, sure. But at the exact same moment, no. What does this mean? It's like light and darkness. There's one or the other. So one characteristics of our mind is the inability to have two opposing thoughts related to the same object at the same time. I can think you can have attraction and aversion to two different aspects of the same object. Like you like the texture, but you don't like the smell. But as we nourish certain states, we are taking away the opportunity to nourish other aspects. So, and our inner predispositions work like this. The less I nourish that characteristic, the weaker it becomes until that plant dies, that sprout dies, that seed dries up and dies. So, just as a metaphor, we can talk about the poisonous, let's say poisonous plants. So we shouldn't be working on cutting the branches. Instead, we need to work on burning up the roots and taking away its power to grow or come back. So on a subtle level and then on a very subtle level, we need to generate these antidotes so that we can oppose those negative characteristics, those poisonous seeds. And with this, we see a little bit, we see the one principal objective in our lives. If someone asks us, "What do you do? What do you do? What's the meaning of life?" One of the main meanings of life is to cultivate healthy seeds and to stop feeding unhealthy ones. In other words, cultivate our more beautiful aspects, characteristics, and stop nourishing those that create suffering. And this takes us to another very important point. This is my own theory. It can be right or wrong. Don't take it for granted. I've asked myself, what is the function of pain? Physical, mental, emotional? What would happen if we didn't have pain? First of all, we would die right away. Because if it were pleasurable to be hungry, who would eat? So the fact that hunger is not pleasurable, we look for a solution. Makes us look for a solution. So when there's a state, in other words, when suffering manifests, it's a sign, it's a symptom, it's an alarm that we're not in harmony. There's something that's not working. Even the definition of sickness, for example, within Tibetan medicine, one definition of sickness is it's a state of imbalance of the body. It's actually an imbalance of the elements and the humors. So what happens is I eat something that is not good for me, and I have a symptom. My body's telling me that that thing is bad for me. So I should listen to that symptom and realize that I'm not doing things correctly. The more I'm able to live harmoniously, what would be the sign? The sign of living in a harmonious way would be that I have more pleasurable signs and fewer signs of suffering. Also on an emotional level, the more pleasurable emotions that we have, the more pleasurable emotions we have, that's a sign that we're living more and more in harmony with ourselves and with the environment. And the opposite is also true. So, there are two words that are fundamental along the Buddhist path are papam and punya in Sanskrit, and in Tibetan, dikpa, and punya is sonam. So these two words. Before giving you a translation, let me give you the definition of these two words. Papam or dikpa in Tibetan, these are the seeds that once sprouted and once the fruit is given, they show up as suffering. The result is suffering. Punya or sonam are seeds that once they have sprouted and once they have given their fruits, they give experiences of pleasure, and we experience pleasure and pain through sensation, through feeling. So if I want to have sweet seeds, if I want to have a sweet taste, I need to plant sweet seeds that will give sweet fruit. So the actions that give that are those sweet seeds, those are virtuous actions. Seeds that once they have given their result, they bring sensations of joy and peace and happiness. And all interactions, karma, all interactions that bring to plant seeds, that once they have sprouted and given fruit, and the fruit of sadness, malaise, and suffering, we call those generally negative karma or negativities. And then there are seeds that once they have sprouted and given its fruit, they generate neither pleasure nor pain. It's kind of neutrality, and there are very few of those. But it's important for us to understand that when we talk about virtue and mental defilements, we're talking about not about something, how can I say, a kind of moralism where we're told what is right and what is wrong. We're talking about the interactions that allow for balance or take away balance. And what's the final judge to say what's right or what's wrong? The feeling, actual sensation. These the alarms that go off less. For example, we take 10 doctors, and each one tells us to do something different. Who's right in the end? The one to judge what can judge is the sensation that one actually feels. If the alarms are sounding of suffering and malaise, then there's obviously a lack of harmony. So here we see the importance of conduct. And where is conduct on these three levels? Where can it be found? It can be found on the gross level, the coarse level. So our behavior, our conduct. And remember that on this coarse level, that's where we can nourish, we can water the sprouts that are already there, or the seeds that were planted. Also plant new seeds there on that the gross level of existence. That's where the importance of a physical, verbal, and mental conduct, like virtuous conduct of body, speech, and mind, where it's so important. Not because we want to be good, but because we want to be in harmony with ourselves and others. And if I want to help you be in harmony with yourself, I can't help you be in harmony if I myself am not at harmony with myself. It just doesn't work. And now we're not going to get into details on this, but so that for me to help you be in harmony, I need to be at harmony with myself. And at that point, I'll have a much greater influence over you. And that's the real difficulty. The real difficulty of helping people on a spiritual level is because I can't help you become what I am not. I can't help you be patient if I get angry myself so often. Have you ever received advice from someone who doesn't actually live that kind of advice? It stays on a conceptual realm, because on that, at that point, I mean, if you want good advice, go and talk to artificial intelligence. I tried. Now there's many different artificial intelligence sites. I went online and I made very specific questions. I asked very specific Dharma questions. Even asking questions about the Mahamudra or what's the meaning of an empowerment. And the answers were really, really good. The problem is when I read an answer, what's that level of interaction? It's mental. And I'm interacting with a thought. My object of interaction, actually, it's my own thoughts. It's beneficial, but it's very superficial. Instead, when I'm face to face with someone who tells me the same thing, but is the example of that thing, and if we talk about love with someone and that person feels love, that interaction is not only mental, but it's energetic. Call it what you want, and it's what we call also blessings. It's much a deeper interaction. In neuroscience, there's a term that I really like. I don't know if it's right in this context, but we talk about mirror neurons. Certain studies show that when two people are close, the way of acting, being, influences the other on this happens on a neuron level. It's almost as if the neurons of one influence the neurons of the other. Without talking about the five senses. This happens a lot between parents and children. This strength of influence that we have is not on a conceptual level. And when I thought about this, I thought, I can't go. I can't leave my job. I can't. Sometimes I don't know if you've seen this, but in Japan there are some temples that have like robot gurus, where you go to the robot and you ask a question, or you ask for a blessing, or you recite the prayer together. And so I would just say no comment. I leave everyone to judge for themselves. But my main point here is that even what is the function of a lama? Even looking in the ancient past, the function of a lama is to bless. When we talk about in the Guru Puja, where there's the Gana Chakra, where we're making the offerings to the guru and to the yidams, and to each one we look at the specific qualities of each one. And what do we ask? We ask for blessings. Blessings is it's this interaction that comes on a non-conceptual level that allows us to transform ourselves on a deeper level. And if we want to help others on a non-conceptual level, if we want to help others, we need to be what we want the other person to be. And that's an enormous responsibility of being a parent, for example, because the parent should try to be what he wants his child to be. So, you know, it's not enough to say don't be like me, because I'm already teaching you to be like me on many other different levels. And then of course we have our own discernment, we have our ability to nourish, to not nourish it. But if we really want to help others, in reality it's not possible on a deeper level if we ourselves have not reached that which we want the other to become. And this is one of the reasons why when we talk about teaching the Dharma, I remember once a text of Son Rinpoche, one of the masters of Lama Ganchen, who then went to live in the United States. He was extremely direct. There were many geishas and masters who were there in his presence, listening to him. He was one of the most important masters of his generation. Kyabshet Son Rinpoche. We have his image here represented. See the large image of Trijang Rinpoche, the root guru of Lama Ganchen, to our right there. If you see, there's an image where you have Buddha Vairochana, and then a master with a long white beard. That's this is very thin, long beard. That's the representation of Kyabshet Son Rinpoche, and he was a great healer as well, and he in this certain point in this teaching that I heard, he started criticizing and yelling his to the geishas and the masters who were in his presence. He said, "You're very courageous, those of you who put your back to the altar." It means those of you who teach, because you can't. His point was, when you put yourself in a position of guiding someone, helping someone, I can only take you where I have already been. That's why, in reality, the attitude of walking together, or I can try to accompany you somewhere where I've already been, but to get to the point that even wanting to help other people at the end of the day, if we want to be at the service of others, at the service of our planet, we have a gross level, a subtle level, and a very subtle level. Of course, we want to manifest on a gross level, but we can't show on a coarse level what doesn't exist on a subtle level. And we can't, we can't have it on a subtle level if it's not on a very subtle level. So what our objective is to work on a subtle and very subtle level of what we want to nourish and what we want to get rid of. When we talk about self-healing, the first point is recognizing what we want to cultivate and what we want to get rid of. And Lama Ganchen Rinpoche, when he, in 1987, 1988, he talked a lot about learning who our real friends are and who are our false friends, our enemies, not understood as people, but our own behavior. And at the time, he often talked about coffee because he had just come to the West and he saw that coffee is a substance that increases. I mean, does it increase our inner speed, or does it slow us down? No, it speeds us up. But generally speaking, the lifestyle that we have, do we need to increase our inner speed or calm down or slow it down? Because the substance in and of itself is not good or bad. It depends on what you need. No? But if I'm living in a cycle where I'm already sped up, beyond what is good for me, brings me states of anxiety, and there's a physical, a direct physical connection. If I'm running 100, if I'm already going 100 an hour, um, and and then and then and then I go down to 80, I feel very, very slow. I want to go 120. No, but instead I probably need to go down to 40. So, and coffee, we know, is habit forming. But to mid and long term, is it good for us or bad for us? Given the context in which we live, it's bad for us. And that's why Lama Ganchen would say that it's a false friend. You take it as something that is good for you, that you like, but it's a fake friend because he's bad for you. And that's one of the reasons why I don't drink coffee. I remember when I was a child, my parents really struggled trying to quit drinking coffee. Um, um, and then years and years later, Rinpoche said, "This is a useless battle. Let's work on something else." But I saw my parents were working so hard; they really struggled, you know. And then I tried it once. My mother drinks coffee without a sugar. I tasted it, and I said, "Oh, it's so bitter. Why would I even want to start?" So I never drank coffee. I tried to not make friends with coffee. And Lama Ganchen calls this self-healing one because self-healing it's not doesn't make reference specifically to a healing practice of the five Dhyani Buddhas, but so on one side we can say Lama Ganchen was extremely modern and he adapted himself, but he was also extremely traditional. And in the antique traditional way, if we take the most traditional texts, like 600 years ago and past, you know, then the practices had the same name, and then it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And Lama Ganchen chose the name self-healing. And when the second time he was in Brazil, my mother asked him, and she said, in the West, workshops work really well. This was 1988, and I need a title to this workshop, to invite people to come. So asked him what he's going to talk about. So that's when that's the first time he publicly used the term self-healing. And that's where this book, Self-Healing 1, comes from, where Rinpoche talks about the first step along our path, where we need to recognize our real friends, what is good for me, what's beneficial to me, and cultivate that, and recognize who my enemies are, what is bad for me, and abandon them. I mean, our enemy, our problem are our enemies that seem like friends, not our friends that. So it's really important to identify, and what is most difficult is trying to abandon what we think is pleasurable, but mid and long term are actually harmful, because there are things that are pleasurable, are pleasurable at the beginning, but they bring about bad results. And there are things that are difficult at the beginning. They're not necessarily pleasurable, but mid and long term bring very positive effects, like meditation, for example. Meditation is good for you, but it's not necessarily pleasurable at the beginning. But we can say that if one can go on and maintain doing it, then it becomes actually pleasurable. If one then has something they think is pleasurable but is actually bad for you, if you stop doing it and you feel good, that also shows a level of balance. So Lama Ganchen would often remind us this expression of Buddha, which is, I am my own protector, I am my own enemy. Dhyani, Dhyani, Dhyani. In other words, one of the first necessary steps, self-healing one, the first step is to stop victimizing ourselves. Stop blaming the world. I know I shouldn't act like this, but did you see what happened? This afternoon I will bring a book. Since we have 2 sessions today, I'm going to bring this book. This book talks about this in a marvelous way. I've promised to bring this many times. I'm going to do it today. One of the first steps of self-healing is about being responsible for oneself, understanding that my state of well-being or suffering depends on me, and following the logic of before. If we said, I have many external conditions, but I don't have the seeds, can I experience those sprouts or that fruit? No. Or I can't experience what I have not created the causes for. It's like saying, I've seen people grow in very, very difficult, unhealthy situations and be very healthy. And I've seen the opposite too. People who were raised in a very healthy environment and actually become very unbalanced people, because someone who has a strong predisposition for anger can develop it from the slightest of conditions. So the conditions around us, they wake up the seeds that we already have. Those seeds are fruit of our previous interactions. This is the concept of karma. When we talk about karma, karma literally means action. In this specific moment of the action where we plant the seeds, and also when we water the previous seeds and live the result of the sprout. So we are responsible for our own actions. This doesn't mean that the other people's actions don't have an impact on us. Because I never thought about this too much, but then one day someone came to me and said, Lama, when you talk about this, I felt so bad. And I asked why. And this person said, I experienced so much violence, and now you're telling me that even that is my fault? Yes and no. Because what happens is the way I live and experience depends mostly on me. But what you do to me interacts with my predispositions, my emotions, and my way of living. So your way of behaving, does it have an influence on me or not? Yes, of course. But this doesn't mean that what I live depends only on you. Your behavior is that external environment that actually wakes up my inner environment that plants one seed or another within me, or reacts to one of the seeds that's inside. So I don't. So of course, um, if we're living a situation of violence on a very gross level, we can say that there is um, a victim, because but but if, for example, I am doing everything I can to hurt you, but if you don't have the seeds, um, if you don't have the seeds to actually experience the suffering that comes from my trying to hurt you, then you won't experience that suffering. In Tibetan, we have this expression, um, he or she doesn't have the right seeds, usually in reference to benefiting from a certain situation or conditions. So my point is, it's everyone is responsible for his own actions. Obviously, I am not at the point to not have any seeds. I am influenced strongly by my environment, my outside environment. But we're all adults here, so we can all see that we have a responsibility on our side to see what we want to cultivate. And our objective is to create the right kind of seeds. I'll give you an example of myself that, to show you that even in front of certain conditions, I don't have the seeds to live certain situations. Talking to other people, I live situations that were really, really, really simple, banal situations. Without getting into too many details. So we can say that I have gratitude towards my past. I haven't planted a certain kind of seed, and today I don't I don't have I don't have to pick fruit like bad this bad fruit. So our objective is to get to a certain level that even in front of certain conditions that we don't experience something, have negative experience and a negative result. So that first step of self-healing exists on 3 levels. There's a physical level, a verbal level, and a mental level, body, speech, and mind. And if we see in Buddha's teachings, very often we repeat often body, speech, and mind, many, many different contexts. Body, speech, and mind, these are 3 levels of interaction. We're still on this coarse level. And as we saw before, it's on the gross level. That's where we nourish or feed or water or not. So it's that coarse level is extremely important. Some people say, "No, I'm working on the subtle level of my existence." It's not possible. That's a lie. You can't work on the subtle without passing through the coarse level. You can't. Once you've worked on your coarse level, then as you work on your coarse, you're also working on your subtle and very subtle. I've seen people say, no, I work on all a subtle level. It's not important what happens on the coarse level of existence. So on the coarse level, I can get angry, I spit in your face, but deep inside, on a more subtle level, I love you. No, it doesn't work like that. So on this first level is body, speech, and mind, and that first step in self-healing, and then we'll talk about self-healing too, which is the actual practice of the five Dhyani Buddhas and the five great mothers. But before we get there, we need to go through self-healing one. Self-healing one is where we're able to recognize within our strength, the potential to generate our self-esteem, to avoid what is harmful to us, and cultivate what is beneficial. It's not for nothing that that he connected self-healing one with the mantra Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakyamuni Soha. The mantra Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakyamuni Soha, beyond being the mantra of Buddha Shakyamuni, represents the path towards enlightenment, where Muni means capacity, ability, tuba, capacity, the seeds that we're planting within. I remember one of the beautiful characteristics of Lama Ganchen. He was not afraid to face things, to adapt, but also to allow others to adapt. And there were some things, for example, you see in front of this throne, you see this symbol, which is a double Vajra. And traditionally, in the four corners, there would be the swastika. Why not? Because in the first years when Buddhism came to the West, and people would ask, well, are you favorable to Nazis? Do you have something to do with Hitler? and before you can explain to someone that an ant is not an elephant, I mean, too much time goes by. So the swastika is an antique symbol that represents stability. It's put in front of the throne to represent this long life, stable life. But what Rinpoche did is he would keep this, but gradually allow people to create a new image. So because there was a request, those who would produce these objects, they adapted them. And I remember similarly when Lama Ganchen came to the West, the first country he went to was Greece, and the first mantra he taught was the mantra of Buddha Shakyamuni, because he's this historic Buddha, and he very connected to creating to working on one's own potential towards enlightenment. But it was a strange situation because he would do the mantra and people would giggle, and they weren't able to stop laughing, and he would he would sing it. Oh Muni Muni Maha Muni. This is ability, great ability, supreme ability. Let it be so. And Shakya, you can translate also as supreme. And then one day he asked, no, nothing. They're saying, no, please tell me what it is. And then they said, because in Greek, Muni means vagina. And so he had so much fun, even more fun than before, and he used that as a way also to connect the people to the mantra. And little by little, it gave a kind of a new meaning to the sound. But the point is, why do we start with this mantra? Because we because at the beginning we need to recognize our potential, our ability. Om Muni Muni, Maha Muni, Shakya Muni. We talk about 4 passages, 4 abilities, and they can be interpreted in 2 different ways. Om is a sound that is made up of 3 sounds: A, U, and Ma. A with U, when you put it becomes O when they're added up, and O with Ma becomes Om. That's why in some traditions, Indian traditions, there's the long Om and with the it becomes Aum. And when it's written, when Om is written, it's made of 3 parts. At the basis, there's the A, and then there's the O, and then above there's the Ma, the 3 sounds. Written in Sanskrit or in Tibetan, you have A, it's a bit bigger, and then there's the kind of the wings, which is the O, and then there's a little circle, which is the which represents the Ma. So these 3 sounds represent different things, but mostly body, speech, and mind. They represent body, speech, and mind on a coarse, subtle, and very subtle level. Coarse, the O, subtle, and then the Ma is very subtle level, body, speech, and mind. So Om has many different meanings, but among the many meanings, it represents also the being in its wholeness, body, speech, and mind on a on a gross, subtle, and very subtle level. So one reading of the mantra Om is us, ourselves, our being, and Muni is ability. The first 2 ability. The first one is about loving oneself, this capacity to love ourselves. That means our ability to cultivate what is good for us and abandon what is bad for us. This means loving oneself, and it's the first step that we need to take. And we have this potential because we are naturally attracted to what is good, and we have aversion to suffering. This is the basis to develop love for ourselves. So that first ability is about developing love for myself, and the second ability is loving others, where I actually expand my love, which doesn't mean loving others in alternative to loving myself. It's an extension, it's an expansion, where loving others, I want to be happy, yes. I want you to be happy too, in the same way. Your happy is as important to me as my own, not in alternative to my own. This binary vision of me and you is a huge mistake along our path. When we have this dualistic view where it's either me or you, where I do something for you, it's a sacrifice. There's either me or there's you. They're your needs or they're my needs. No. Our objective is to get where your happiness, your needs, your suffering is as important to me as my own. And when your happiness is on the same level of my happiness, if I'm doing something for you, I'm doing it also for me. There isn't this distinction. And this is the second capacity. We have this ability, this potential, and this ability to love others. That's the second capacity. Big Mahamuni, big capacity in this reading of the mantra makes reference to our ability to understand the harmony, with how reality really is. Has to do with our correct view of reality. And supreme reality, Shakyamuni, which can be read in two ways. Supreme capacity has to do with our ability to transform. So it makes reference to the Tantra, to the Vajrayana, where we use every interaction, every context as a means for enlightenment. Our ability to transform. Transform doesn't mean, making a glass of water into a rabbit. With that same water, with that same water, I can drown someone or I can save someone's life. I transform it in that way. So, Soha at the end of the mantra means the many different different translations, but one of the easiest is let it be so. So body, speech, and mind of a being, the ability, love oneself, capacity, love others, great capacity, living in harmony with all phenomena, with reality, supreme capacity, transform ourselves towards enlightenment. Let it be so. The first two abilities have to do with loving oneself. One is more superficial. One is deeper. This is another reading, and then the great ability would make reference to bodhicitta, the great love for others, and the last would be the correct view of reality. But self-healing one is about recognizing our abilities, recognizing our potentials, the seeds that we already have. Because one of the greatest difficulties that I see along our spiritual path is this lack of trust that we have in ourselves, faith in ourselves, where I say, oh, it would be so wonderful to be a Buddha, but me, forget it. So we have this tendency of trusting something sacred because we trust someone else more than we trust ourselves. Do for me, because I can't do it myself. But in reality, if I were to speak on, if I were to talk as if I were a Buddha, and you came to me and you said, I entrust myself to you, I would say, I can't take you somewhere where you can't go. I mean, I can hold your hand, but if you don't want to go, I can't force you. I can direct you, but it depends on each one. And what we can do with others, we can interact. We can help others walk. So this first step, I just say it one more time, is where we look at ourselves and we start recognizing on a physical level, on the verbal on a verbal on the interaction on a verbal level and then on a mental level, which ones are good for us and which ones are harmful, independently of whether they bring pleasure or not. Once you do this, at that point, we need to generate the determination to cultivate one and abandon the other. And this is what we call morality. Our ability to cultivate what is beneficial and abandon what is bad for us. And this is a fundamental point, because the more faith I have in myself, that the faith that I can walk, then the more I'll be able to entrust myself to masters who can show me the path. Because if someone says, you can go from here, this beautiful path from here to Monte Rosa, I would say, how wonderful for you that you can take such a long, such a long path. And I think, oh, well, maybe if I take a funicular, but I by myself, I can't do that. I'm not even going to start. I'm not going to try. So instead, if someone says, "Oh, I know it's the path to Buddhahood is long, but you can do it." No, the more faith I have in myself, the more I'm able to take that first step. One problem that we have often with our relationship with our spiritual guides is we don't want a spiritual guide. We want a spiritual savior. We don't want someone who shows us the way. We want someone to put us, someone who can just snap his fingers and make miracles, or at least just put us on his back. And instead, the only path that is possible is the one where Buddha shows us the path and we do the walking. So the actual walking is what is the path. So let's take advantage of this moment. This is where spring has just started. This moment of passage to reflect, reflect on this new cycle that's starting. What is it that I want to cultivate, and what do I want to abandon? And it's not possible just to abandon and immediately leave. It's about, just remember the metaphor of the garden. What plants do I want to nourish? Do I want to water? And what plants do I want to exterminate, little by little? Which plants do I want in my garden? This is a fundamental point. If we're able to understand this well, at this point, we'll understand it much better the meaning of the practice of self-healing and the practice of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas and the 5 Great Mothers, because it starts from the principle of the actual fruit that I want to pick and the seeds that I need to plant. Here we have the 5 Dhyani Buddhas and the 5 Great Mothers represented in front of us. They represent the fruit that we want to pick, and they also represent the seeds that we have already inside, the ones that we want to nourish, that we want to water. In Tibetan, we use the term we talk about a Buddha. For example, let's take Buddha Mogassiddhi. There's Buddha Mogassiddhi of the basis, and then there's Buddha Amogassiddhi of of the result. Drebu is the same word in Tibetan. So there's Amogassiddhi. There's there's Buddha Amogassiddhi as a seed, and then there's Buddha Amogassiddhi as the sprout, and there's Buddha Amogassiddhi as the fully ripened fruit. Where are we? We're kind of between the seed and the sprout. Some are more seed than sprout, some are more sprout than seed, but we have that potential. So it's very important for us to connect with the qualities that we want to develop, that we want to sprout, that we want to nourish. In other words, self-healing shows us the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, the 5 great mothers. They show us, they help us understand who we want to be and show us how to develop those characteristics to reach that state. So before getting there, let's start from things that are quite gross and simple. Let's remember that we live in a cyclical reality. A new cycle is beginning. And this new cycle, which is a year, is made up of inner periods of cycles. There are 12 months in a year. Every month is made up of 4 lunar phases. Every lunar phase is made up of days. A day is made up of day and night. Getting to more subtle cycles. Let's see. I forgot the numbers now, but it's quite a while that I haven't thought about this, but it's the number of inner cycles we have within a day. I need to redo the calculation, but the shortest inner cycle is considered to be a breath. And in Tibetan astrology, for example, and with this I'm going to conclude, time is calculated based on our breath. So when we calculate how much time it takes for the planet to do an entire circumambulation around the sun, the reference point at the beginning is a breath. One breath calculated with our time is about 4 seconds. 6 breaths would be a minute. 60 minutes is an hour, but it's not actually an hour. And then this cycle, every cycle of 60 is made of 700 and so the reference point with the temporal reference point is our breath. And also to calculate external cycles, internal cycles, it's all about our breath. And we ask ourselves, what is time? The definition of time, the most beautiful one that I've ever seen, is it was written by this physicist Carlo Rovelli in the book in In Order of Time. He said that time is the unit of measure of change. And time, there is no absolute time. We relate to this absolute Newtonian time, but it's quite fictitious. But even related to physics, it's specific. So what is our reference point to see change in others is ourselves. So when I was studying these things, I asked why is it in an hour? Why do we divide a day into 24 equal parts? It's okay, maybe the 12 zodiacs of the day, the cycles of the day and night, antique Chinese. There was like the time of the rabbit, the 12 zodiac signs that imagine the chaos there. I don't know. It's just a different way of thinking. So doing this, thinking about this, I realized that a complete cycle, complete energetic cycle, lasts an hour. So when we divide the 24 hours, the day into 24 parts, every part at what we call an hour is a complete energetic cycle. Actually, a complete one would be 2 hours, one going forward, one going backwards. So every time we have a breath, prana has a relationship to one of the elements. There's a certain number of breaths that's related to the certain elements, and a complete cycle lasts 1 hour. I was curious about this. I looked into it, but my point here, where I want to get, is we live in a cyclic reality, and we repeat and we repeat doing the same thing, and we see the dawn again and again. We go through a same situation again and again. In the springtime repeats itself. And someone might say, well, it's never the same. Of course, it's not the same, but it's repetitive, this experience. So my question that I ask again, and each one should ask for himself, in this new cycle that's coming, who do I want to become when I get to that next cycle? What do I want to plant? And where is it? How do I water one plant or not? It's through our daily interactions. Whether we like it or not, whether we want to see it or not, when we are born, we already bring seeds with us that are already starting to sprout, even in that moment of gestation. And as we as we grow, the seeds are sprouting. So the question, these seeds are sprouting whether we like it or not, whether we see it or not. So the question is, do we want to be more aware of this process? Do we want to participate more actively in the garden that we want to develop, that we want to plant? The lotus flower, for example, is that about sprouting our qualities, our inner qualities, our inner garden. And I'll just repeat one more time, and we conclude. Really, with sincerity towards ourselves, with seriousness towards ourselves, this springtime, this cycle is not going to repeat as it is. At some point, we are going to die, and when we die, we bring the seeds with us. So we need to take care of this. So I'm in a new cycle. I have a new opportunity. What do I want to cultivate? What do I want to abandon? And let's take the reins in our own hands. Take advantage of the conditions we have, and with more and more with awareness and determination, decide what we want to cultivate and what we want to abandon. If we don't do this towards ourselves, we won't be able really to open up our hearts towards others. When we're able to love ourselves, this generates a feeling, an inner feeling of fullness. And it's when I'm full that I have to give to others. When my needs are not met, it's hard for me to see others because I see only my own needs and I don't see others. When I'm able to cover my basic needs, I'm able to love myself, and I'm able to do that. It brings a level of fullness that will overflow. And when it starts to overflow, then I'm able to give to others. It's said, it's said that it's not possible to love others if we don't first love ourselves. So loving others is not in opposition to loving ourselves, but it's fundamental for us to start where we are. Because if I keep thinking that I need to love others, but without first developing love for myself, then that love for others is conceptual. Like saying, "Oh, I should be on the 10th step, but I'm not, but I should be, but I'm only here on the first or the second step. Let's start where we are. We want to get to that 10th, but we have to start where we are. That first step is loving ourselves. It's self-healing one, recognizing our potential, our capacity, and our abilities, and cultivating them. And this is a way to give meaning to our lives, seeing our life in all of its cycles, seeing that the life is cyclical in relationships, in experiences. Here we continue within this cyclic existence. Cyclic existence is always us living these cycles. So what's important is not what we do, but what we become, what we are. And that's what, for me, gives greater meaning to life. It's time for our dedications.
Drove munsela tato ne gyurchi kewa kunto yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longche ching sada lamge yente rabzone dorje change kopa nyur toba shon nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan dele kshin Ninsen takto delek pe koncho sumke chingelo koncho sumke ngodrubo tsol koncho sumke trashishun.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Have a good lunch. Thank you, everyone. And we will come back at 3:30.